I'm doing a Great British Bake Off 2024 Bake Along. Let's get into 1970s week.
This week's signature bake, a Croquembouche.
Technically a Profiterole stack, but is like the same thing.
Now, out of all of the challenges I've done so far for this 2024 Bake Along, this is the one I'm most nervous about. Why? I can make a profiterole no problem. Can I make profiteroles and then stack them into a tower using caramel? Yeah, we're just gonna have to wait and see. So keep your fingers crossed for me and let's get into it.
So for my profiterole stack, I decided to make chocolate choux filled with espresso whipped cream and then some standard choux filled with hazelnut mousseline, which is what you're seeing me prep here. For that, I needed some hazelnut butter, look how creamy that is, and then some creme patisserie, also known as creme pat or pastry cream. This cornstarch and egg thickened custard is pretty easy to make and super delicious. All you need to do is whip up some egg yolks with some sugar, cornstarch, vanilla, and a pinch of salt, and then scald some milk, i.e. get it almost to a boil, and then very carefully and slowly pour the hot milk into the egg mixture, whisking vigorously so the eggs don't curdle. This then goes back into the saucepan to heat until thickened, again whisking the whole time, and then is finished off with some butter because, this custard doesn't have enough fat already. I strained the finished custard into a clean bowl to make sure that it was perfectly smooth, and then covered with plastic wrap and let chill in the fridge for at least 4 hours. Now onto the choux pastry. For this bake, I decided to try making chocolate choux for the first time. To do this, I heated milk, butter, sugar, and salt until boiling, mixed in flour and cocoa powder until a dough formed, and then cooked the dough until it reached about 175 degrees. I then added the dough to a stand mixer, mixed until it was back down to about 145 degrees, and then started adding my eggs, making sure each was fully incorporated before adding the next. You know your choux is good to go when you have a nice V of dough hanging off the paddle, just like this. I transferred the dough to a piping bag and then piped 12 choux balls max per parchment-covered baking tray to make sure that they weren't overcrowded, as they will release steam as they bake. Next, I smoothed down the tops with some water, sprinkled on some powdered sugar, and then baked them at 400 degrees for 25 minutes. While they were still hot, I poked a hole in the bottom of each with a paring knife and then let them rest on their side so that the steam could escape. These then went into my preheated but off toaster oven to finish drying out, as I had a full batch of regular choux to make, which again is the exact same process minus the cocoa powder. And here they are all baked. Ta-da! Next I had to finish off my fillings, starting with my espresso whipped cream and then finishing up the hazelnut mousseline. Now mousseline is basically just creme pat with more butter, so I whipped up some butter, added my hazelnut butter and creme pat, and then whipped it all until it came together into a nice smooth cream. I transferred both fillings into piping bags and then filled the chocolate choux with the espresso whipped cream and then the regular choux with the hazelnut mousseline. This took forever, but in the end I had about 4 dozen perfectly baked and filled profiteroles. Now the profiteroles were easy, making the caramel was the hard part. It took me not 1, not 2, but 3 tries to finally get something usable. Attempt number 1 crystallized, attempt number 2 burned, but attempt number 3 was just right. Well, kinda. It was maybe still a little overdone, but I was over it and decided to just roll with it. The most important lessons I learned from this wet caramel making experience were to let your sugar fully dissolve, do not touch it once it starts boiling, and maybe don't make wet caramel. Anyway, I dipped the top of each profiterole into the incredibly hot caramel, only kind of burning myself along the way. These gloves really helped prevent any major accidents, and then picked out my favorites and separated them out into the number needed for each layer, which meant it was time to see if I could actually build a tower of choux. The last thing I needed was unfortunately yet another batch of caramel to use as a glue, bringing the total caramel count in one day up to 4. I was so tired. Anyway, I opted for a 7-tiered tower, so I arranged my bottom 7 profiteroles on a cake board and started dipping and sticking. Design-wise, I was attempting to get a swirl with the chocolate choux, however, that was a nice to have, not a need to have. The true goals here were to not end the night with 3rd-degree burns on my hands, have a tower of choux that remained standing, and then maybe also get a pattern. But as it went on, the tower grew, and before I knew it, I was placing my final profiterole. And it stayed standing! I finished it off with a little extra caramel. And that, my friends, is a croquembouche. I'm so proud of how this turned out and really can't believe that it remained upright.
It's alive. I'm honestly so happy that this turned out as an actual croquembouche. It was a little touch and go when we got to caramel number 3. And honestly, I'd be very happy to not make caramel again for a very long time. I've definitely done some tasting along the way, but let's see how it is altogether. Creamy, hazelnutty, get just a little bit of crunch. I'm just gonna have to go for it. The coffee really comes through in the chocolate one. Chocolate less so, but you know, that's okay. A bit of a mess, but you know, aren't we all? The fact that I ended this day with a tower of profiteroles that are still standing is just above and beyond success. I'm gonna go finish this, and I'll see you back next week for Patisserie Week.